Okay, then let's get started. Welcome to our bi-weekly workgroup meeting. First, briefly, few organizational things. I will be on vacation for the next two meetings, but Stefan Merker has gladly accepted to represent me. So we can also continue our working efforts during vacation time. And then another brief announcement. So we will get a few more repositories into the responsibility area of our working group. Bosch bootloader shall be transferred. Here's the open pull request. They've proposed to delay the transfer until we have finished our current efforts with migrating all the pipelines. But then later we will also have Bootstrap, Bosch, and let me check. Yeah, okay, these two repositories will then also be part of our working group.
One thing we could discuss, but we need then Dave for that. Hello, here you are. Would be, let's say, if everybody agrees and we go ahead, we are talking about this bootstrap, the bubble movement. If that is supposed to happen, the question is, would we open a new area in the CFD to have separate, or maybe also to demonstrate that we do not have sufficient committers for this project?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of not really having the team size, but also not having really the skill set. It's very different from maintaining CF deployment. There's a lot of much more lower level infrastructure knowledge required to work with Terraform, and then knowledge of more in-depth knowledge of Bosch, working with Bosch deployment, and making sure that the cloud config and the runtime config are set up correctly. And there's a little bit of Cloud Foundry knowledge on top in terms of, we need a load balancer. And so there's that piece that comes in. And so I've had discussions with people about whether this is the right move. Nothing's materialized as late. That's why I posted and just said, can we just delay the decision until we're ready to at least talk about it as a working group and decide if this is the right home for this. I think the challenge is that nobody wants this project.
I see. Yeah.
You know, I think it's a case for us. For me, it's a case of, I feel like the Bosch team is the right place for this. It's 95% their wheelhouse. It's what they do to test Bosch deployment anyway. They don't use Bubble, they use their own Terraform templates, but they basically do the same thing. But I get the feeling that they don't want it because they didn't write it and they don't know how to maintain it, which is understandable. But it's left it in a very isolated position since the infrastructure team was disbanded about 3 or 4 years ago. It stagnated for a while. I took it upon myself to resurrect it and at least get a pipeline up and running so that it bumped Bosch deployment, so that we were up to date. And then I handed it off to a team that was supposed to manage that. They got a little bit maybe optimistic about how much management they could do, and they tried to actually modernize it, and that derailed their maintenance of it. And so it languished again until Ruben Stevenson and myself resurrected it a few weeks ago. And so it's now back in the state of it needs a home, but nobody wants it.
Okay, it's for us difficult to steer this decision because we don't know the history and okay, so maybe then we let it a bit
right, we need to have a really serious discussion about, okay, well,
yeah,
what is the future, not just of Bubble, but how are we going to produce environments to test CF deployment on? You know, one thought that went through my mind was, well, maybe we should use whatever tooling the Bosch team uses to stand up their Bosch deployment environments. And that way we're just using infrastructure that is maintained by them, or at least tooling to produce infrastructure that's maintained by them. And then all we have to focus ourselves on is, oh, well, in addition to that infrastructure, we need a load balancer, and we can have a small piece of tooling that specifically does that for Cloud Foundry. The other concern with Bubble, unfortunately, is it's also how people stand up concourse environments if they're running concourse still on VMs. So that's definitely not our problem to try and fix. But it would leave the people that are still running concourse that way a little bit in the lurch. They would have to figure out how they want to handle that going forward. Now, I suspect most people are moving towards concourse on Kubernetes, so maybe that's not a problem. But it's something that I feel we should talk to teams about and figure out, you know, what is the plan for those environments going forward.
So that sounds to me like we need a discussion between our working group here and the foundational infrastructure working group,
Right.
and then together it needs a RFC or a proposal how to set up those environments, and then it can go to the TOC. Then I would. Okay.
Yeah. So I suspect that the next step needs to be an email to CFDev to start a conversation. Or maybe try and direct things onto Slack where it's easier to have those kind of back and forth discussions. But right now we've got a lot going on. I've got a lot going on with my normal team, and I just don't have time to engage in that discussion. Yeah. And so that's why I said, can we let's just hold off on this for now, and see where we go.
I mean, the good news is we are quite familiar with Bubble. We use it a lot for the CF performance tests, and we're also familiar with Terraform and the AWS infrastructure. But of course, for the foreseeable future, we would not have any capacity for maintaining this project. So right now it's working fine, but yeah. So, but what would be now the right place for a discussion? Who should own this and maintain this project? CFDev or?
I feel like CFDev directing people to Slack would work. I mean, I just opening a post on Slack, I don't know how many people would see it. And so telling people that it's there via CFDev might get more eyes on it, and more people who have opinions could then get together and discuss this.
Yeah.
If that would be triggered, then I could take it, the thread also to the TOC and say, this is a topic we are discussing about that. For now, please don't, move forward, or I put a -1 on this on this PR. That's also easy.
Good. Okay, so this needs further discussion. We have a few more points on the agenda today, so let's continue, because otherwise we will run out of time. So next would be Maximilian Möhl and maybe Alexander to give us an overview of this proposed feature, TCP dump for everyone. Then I will give a brief upview of the migrated pipelines to our own concourse. Carsten is not in the call, but yeah, okay. And then finally, we will talk about the Ruby 3 update of the Kapi release. Okay, good. Then Max, please start your presentation.
Okay, so I hope you can all see my screen.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so this TCP dump for everyone is something we have been developing for the past few months, mainly by Dominic, but he's unavailable today, so I'm taking over for him. The problem that we are facing is we often get tickets from customers, or we see issues where it's not really clear where the issue lies, the underlying issue, and we often then just get tickets saying, yeah, my app is not working, the network is too slow, something with the routing stack is wrong. We need to get some insights. Then we look at it and we see it's an issue with the routing stack. It's, I don't know, the request is coming, the response is coming from the app. In the end, it kind of goes to, yeah, okay, you reproduce it, we take a TCP dump, so we need to set up a session, which takes time and is effort. And we would like to have something where we just tell the customer, hey, reproduce the issue, capture the traffic using this command, and then send us the files so that we can have a look and see what is wrong. So as I said, it's mainly based on tickets and customer requests that we get. And we would really like to give them the power to do it, to debug stuff on their own. We do not expect everyone to know how to read these PCAP files, how to read TCP dumps, and understand what is going on, but just giving them the power to provide us the information we need is already a big step forward for us, especially stuff like 502s in the Go router where the customer claims the app has not crashed, and there's something in between the Go router and the app, for example. And another nice thing that we could also get with this is kind of dump ingress scenarios. So we also have issues where the customer is even unable to connect to the Go router, or in our case, the HA proxy of the platform. And we currently don't have a way to easily capture traffic there. So usually the solution is to tell the customer to do it on their side, but that's also difficult. So with that solution, with this TCP dump solution, we could also be able to just capture selective traffic on the load balancer of the platform. And this data gives us hard evidence on what is actually going on, where the failures are occurring, what is going wrong, and yeah, enables us to just find out what the issue is, whether it's on our side or on customer side or app side. Basically, there are two scenarios. The vanilla Cloud Foundry scenario, where you have the normal Cloud Foundry app, either one or multiple instances, and you just want to see which request or which network traffic is reaching it. And the way it's implemented is currently is that you stream it back to the user. So the capture on the app container is streamed back to the CLI, which then captures it to a file. But it's also planned to have an intermediate storage on the access VM of the PCAP server, so that we can capture traffic even if the client doesn't have a strong network connection, because we need to send back all traffic. So if the connection is not strong enough, not quick, not fast enough, we would lose packets and the connection would die. The same is also true for Bosch. There's also the case that we want to stream back to the client of the developer or whatever, but also to keep it in the platform to make sure that we have enough bandwidth to actually capture all the traffic that we are seeing. Okay, now it's time for a short demo. So let's see. Okay, so we have a CF landscape here. Now we have this one here. So we have the PCAP server, or the PCAP deployment, and the PCAP server running on this landscape. And you basically start by talking to the endpoint that this PCAP server provides, which also offers you the CF CLI plugin, either for Mac or for Linux, kind of like Concourse does. You can then just download that file and install it with CF install plugin. I already did that, so no need to do that right now. But we need to go to the right org and space. And now we have a simple test app that we use for all kinds of testing. And what it does is it just tells us what was the forwarded for header when the app received the request. So we can see, okay, this is my client, and then here we have the HA proxy in that case. Now what we can do is we can take a look at the CLI of this PCAP plugin. And basically we just tell it to capture from a specific app name. In that case, that's the forwarded for app. And where we want to capture to, let's just call it capture PCAP. We can also provide a filter expression. So if we say, okay, we want to capture all traffic only on port 8080, for example, then we could specify that. For now, I will leave that out. We could specify the instance, the type. This is either web or job. I'm not entirely sure, but these two types basically will always be web for capturing traffic, and also the network device or interface you want to capture from. So let's just start the capture. And we now start sending requests to the application. You can see that's also immediately reading data. So we can stop that now. Into the file, and it tells you, okay, I'm capturing from both instances of the application. You could also just capture from one. And now we have to download the capture, and we can open it in Wireshark. And here we now have our traffic, encrypted traffic for that matter, because this is before envoy. But there's a trick to work around that. We also have the loopback device available in the container. So we can capture from that. And what we get by this is we get unencrypted traffic. Because envoy does the TLS termination, and then the application talks plain HTTP. So now we can look at the full HTTP request and the response as well, which contains our forwarded for text. Okay, I think that's it for the demo. Oh yeah, okay. So this is the currently implemented scenario, which is just streaming back to user, so that's not saving on the VM or anything. It's the most simple use case, but it does include single or multiple instances. Now, for the details, this is the current architecture plus what is planned. So what we saw is we as a user, we just use the CF CLI, we log in as we do always, and we can just specify the application that will work out what where the application is and how to talk to it. And this is done by talking to the PCAP server and the UAA. So the token that we get from UAA gets sent to the PCAP server, and the PCAP server then validates that token with UAA. And currently it checks if the person, the user that is trying to capture from a specific application is at least space developer in the space where the application lives, to make sure that no one can just randomly capture traffic from other applications. The API route, by the way, is just exposed using route registrar, like other deployments do as well. Now, in our case, the PCAP server realized, okay, he wants to capture from, the user wants to capture from an application. So it talks to the cloud controller to locate the cell that the application is on and get some other details from it. And it then talks to the PCAP server. So this is the PCAP server API or PCAP API. And this is the PCAP server. The naming is a bit confusing, which is running on each Diego cell. So it has a dedicated port. And then it tells the PCAP server, hey, this is the app ID, this is the index, please capture traffic from there. Then the PCAP server enters the network namespace of the app container and captures traffic as specified by the PCAP server. So sets the filter and does all of those things. Selects the interface. And for the future, it's planned that we then store the file that or store the stream that we get back from the PCAP server on a local PCAP file that when capturing is done, we copy to S3 so that the client can then be handed out a URL saying, hey, in the future, if you want to download, please contact that URL. And then it's kind of the same thing. So we then again get a token. With a token, we can validate if it's authorized to access the data, and then we can stream it back to the client. The Bosch case is basically the same. The main difference is it does not talk to the cloud controller, but the Bosch director, because we now need to locate the instance VM of that deployment instead of some app container. But here as well, there's the PCAP server running. So we connect to that PCAP server, tell it to capture the traffic, and yeah, it does pretty much the same thing as with the app container, just that it runs on a different VM and it potentially doesn't have to enter the network namespace of the BPM container because the ports are mapped anyways to the host. Okay. Are there any questions to this diagram?
Yeah, just one thought that comes to mind is, does that mean there are two PCAP servers running on the Diego cell, or can that one co-located instance handle both app containers and monitoring Diego itself?
The PCAP server is a single binary. So once the Bosch part, which is currently not implemented, is implemented, it should be able to handle both in both cases. Mm-hmm. Okay. We have a few open questions that we still need to address. The main question being whether or not this should be part of CF deployment or just an optional plugin, experimental ops file, or something like that. I will briefly go over the questions, then we can talk about them. Then the question, how can we integrate the PCAP server as a Bosch deployment? Because as far as we know, CF deployment is only split into instance groups, but not into separate deployments. And we would like to have the PCAP API server as a separate Bosch deployment. So basically, the ops file needs to be injected into the CF deployment because we need to push it to the Diego cells. But the PCAP server, a PCAP API itself needs to be an independent Bosch deployment, and that's like, what's the best way to achieve that? There is also the possibility to implement it more like CF SSH, so not have a dedicated binary running alongside on every VM once, but rather to have the PCAP server run inside the app container. This would obviously increase security because you would not be able to escalate out of your current container because it's not running outside the container, but rather inside the container. This is currently not possible because the binary needs the capnet raw, or the user that's running the binary needs the capnet raw capability to capture traffic. It could be possible with file capabilities, but that's something we have to explore in the future. And then it's unclear whether or not the authentication as a space developer is enough or if we need more. But since the space developer can push the application and basically has full control over the application, what it logs, what it sees, what it doesn't see, we thought that space developers probably appropriate for this, and there's no reason to introduce something new. But yeah, that's up for discussion.
Well, okay, the interesting questions for us is, of course, what would you need in CF deployment? I mean, typically for an extension like this, you can provide an experimental ops file, which defines all the artifacts you need, and whoever wants to use this adds this ops file to their CF deployment. And the rest is packaged as, I don't know, Bosch release somewhere else, and would then be installed next to Cloud Foundry.
I'm curious about the desire to have a separate deployment for the API. Can you go more into the reasoning behind that?
I don't know how applicable that is for other people, but it's mainly for us interesting because we can then manage it independently of CF deployment. Because on our landscape, CF deployment is already quite big, and we would not like to increase its size even further. So we would, the idea is to just have it as a separate deployment so that we can manage it independently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I mean, for this case, there are several options, I would say. If we look just for CF deployment, I guess an experimental ops file and deploying it as part of the deployment would be the natural approach. But still, I mean, at the end of the day, it is an own Bosch release, right? And we already today, for instance, the Diego cells, we deploy as separate deployments. That's then something that you package, in our landscapes in a special case. And you can tweak basically every deployment. I mean, with ops files, you can do basically everything on the resulting manifest, and it would be possible to maybe, to not deploy it as part of this CF deployment, of the CF deployment, but have a separate PCAP deployment, and then just provide the necessary information that is maybe needed to CF. How to reach the IP addresses, etc., via Bosch links or whatever. So I guess that can be solved completely outside. If we add it to CF deployment, and if it is part of the working group, it would be, of course, part of the CF deployment.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the the content of this working group. But for me, the discussion starts a little bit earlier. I mean, the real meat is in certain projects, right, that implement the PCAP server and the PCAP API, and they belong then to the application runtime working group. Is that correct, to Amelia?
That's a good question that I can't answer.
Okay, because this is, I guess, something that should not belong to the CF deployment working.
Yeah, no.
I mean, we also don't own CAPI, we don't own routing, we don't own Diego, etc. These are separate working groups, and CF deployment is specifically to build everything together to provide an installer that is made up of the other of the content provided by other working groups. Let's say it like this.
Yeah, but definitely the release would be owned by someone else.
And then the real interaction is actually, I would say, for CF deployment, really in the beginning an experimental ops file, and then we will see how this route goes, right? If it becomes the hottest feature since sliced bread, then maybe it makes it one day into the standard deployment. But that's something that is to be shown.
Yeah, generally speaking, the experimental ops file is the starting point, and then either, like you said, either gets inlined into the main manifest or just promoted to be a more stable ops file that just lives in the operations directory, and people can choose to include it. My assumption is this all one Bosch release?
Yes, it's one single Bosch release.
I mean, at that point, we will have, once it is even an experimental ops file, we'll have tooling in CI that will keep the version of that up to date as new versions are released. So I don't see the problem with including like the API part of that in that ops file, because it will all be kept up to date. It's purely a question of how viable is it to have an ops file that doesn't install everything you need.
Yeah,
You have to
I
tell
understand
people,
that.
you install this, add this ops file, but also go over here and deploy this completely separate thing to get everything working. And the user experience from that perspective is what's kind of on my mind.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it does make sense to have like the experimental ops file to include all of it, and then, as Stefan said, we can split it apart for us as we need it.
And then I think these other questions are probably better targeted at the app runtime working group, because they're the ones that have this kind of experience with CFSSH and that kind of thing, and the roles. That's all kind of the CAPI team. So I suspect that they would have more opinions than we would on those.
Okay. Do you have any other questions to me or to us?
No, I mean, this is really cool. I think I can definitely see the value to people. But from a CF deployment perspective, yeah, I'd love to get this in here.
Okay. And thank you for your time.
Yeah, regarding the copy related questions, we can also sync. Yeah. In a coffee break or whatever. That's possible. I do have some opinions here, but it's not for this working group meeting.
Okay, we will do that.
No problem.
Okay, thanks a lot for the presentation. Good. Then let's proceed. Yeah, update on the migrated pipelines.
I tried to ping Carson, but I didn't get a response. So
yeah, well, he also missed the meeting yesterday evening for some reason. Something is not synced on his phone. Okay, but so this is the current state, our new concourse, and these are the pipelines that have been migrated. And what Carson did yesterday is he migrated the remaining credentials to our, here they still are, here to this concourse's CRED hub. So we should now have pretty much everything to run these pipelines. And he also triggered some of them, but not all. Some have automatic triggers and just monitor certain things. I think he triggered the cats. That was, yes, from yesterday. What I did not fully understand is for the CF deployment fan out tests, we need a Windows resource for testing. And this is something that cannot yet be shared because it uses a VMware internal credential, right?
yes, it's using, we have an internal toolsmiths team that produces a pool of CF deployment environments. And when we implemented that, we were testing that out for people. And so that claims an environment from that pool that deploys Windows on it, or deploys Windows cells on it, and then runs the Windows cats. So we need to figure out, I don't know if that problem, so to speak, has been solved in general for working groups as to how they like access that system, or whether we need to figure out a more working group centric way of doing that. In the short term, probably the easiest thing would be just to convert this to be like our other environments where there's a long-lived Bosch director, and we just deploy as needed and then tear it down at the end.
Okay.
So I don't think that would be too involved to get that work done. Because there's nothing special about the deploy or running the tests. It's really just, where does the environment come from?
Okay, good.
Yeah, I don't know why this won't load. I don't think there's particularly that much information there that it should be a problem, but
Yeah. Good. Well, yeah, seems to take longer.
it's fine.
So okay, so that's why the CF deployment is still paused.
Mhm.
The other, this one should maybe. Oh,
We just presumably haven't had a PR come in since.
Yeah, someone could open a PR, then we can test this one here. This is also why is update releases still paused?
I'm not sure on that one.
If we unpause it, we have to ensure that the other one is paused, right? Otherwise,
Yes,
Yeah, well,
I think
sure.
Carson did go through and say he said he was pausing pipelines, so like cats and smoke tests should be paused on the release integration pipeline.
Okay.
MCI.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
as he's unpaused one, he has paused the other.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
okay. So because I think update releases, there's no reason why we should not unpause it. Yeah, okay, good. Then I can contact Carson again and discuss the details with him.
It may just have been an abundance of caution of not wanting everything running all at the same time and wanting to kind of deal with them one by one as issues arose.
Oh, well, maybe it was running yesterday or something, yeah.
Yes.
Smoke tests, this was already migrated, but this is the first real green one, which moved from front to end and produced the final release. So this is fine. Pull requests, okay, I will.
If you click on the cats tab there, I think I saw that there were jobs there that had run.
Yes.
No, on the pull request pipeline, there's a grouping. So the CF deployment pull request, and then there's
sorry.
cats pull request. There we go. So those have run.
Okay, here. Okay.
So we must have forgotten a PR to cat since that pipeline was unpaused.
Yeah, good. This is a bit hidden. Okay, good. Yeah, okay, good. So that means we have to sort out a few details with Carson, and yeah, we'll try to schedule another meeting.
I mean, regarding those groups, I think it's just a question of isolating. Are you looking at which repo are you looking at pull requests for? We could split them out into separate pipelines if that's easier to reason about.
Yeah,
so you could have a CATS pull request pipeline and a CF deployment pull request pipeline.
Yeah.
But yeah.
What do you see on the overview? I know on the overview you see.
So normally the problem is that when you go to a pipeline, you'll see the first group, and the first group is CF deployment, and so you have to realize that there are groups there for the other. The other repositories that we get PRs.
Yeah, well, okay, it's a matter of taste in the end.
Yeah, and that, like I say, that's totally open to. If we prefer separate pipelines instead of groups on the same pipeline, we can do that.
Of course, yeah, good. Yeah, I mean that's then the fine tuning, yeah.
Right.
First, we need to get things running.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did notice if you go back to the CATS pipeline real quick.
Yes.
I'd changed this pipeline so that the run CATS Kate's job was not blocking on cutting a release. It looks like that change did not make it here. I'll need to make sure that I did commit it to CATS, but I thought I had. So this might just need to be reflown with a new version of the pipeline, because that should not be a blocking job anymore. So I'll check and make sure that I actually committed that.
Okay. Would you update this or?
Yeah, I definitely committed that 6 days ago. Yeah, I should be able to log in and refly that, so that's fine.
Okay, good. Perfect. Okay, good. Anything else on the pipeline migration topic?
No, I think this looks really good.
Yeah.
I think the challenge is not going to be moving the pipeline so much as moving the environments into our
Yeah.
IaaS
Sure.
accounts. But this
Next
is
challenge.
a great first step, and it will really exercise our concourse instance, make sure that that's scaled appropriately, and then we can go from there.
Okay, fine, good. So then let's come to the final point. Integration of the latest copy release with Ruby 3. So this is the latest 132 copy release. The latest in CF deployment is 130, yes? And this one now introduces Ruby 3. And now we are thinking how to get this into our regular CF update here at SAP. So the best thing that we could wish for is that CF deployment is updated to this copy version.
Maybe the background is we are not sure what will happen on our big landscapes when Ruby 3 gets into the cloud controller. It could do bad things. And then we want to have an option to roll back the cloud controller to Ruby 2.7. And the safest way is when we have a version switch where really only the Ruby 3 change is inside and no other functional stuff, because then you never know what happens. And so our idea was, is it possible that we cut a CF deployment release, maybe already on this new concourse, the next days, which consumes copy 132 before copy 133 gets available. And then we would take this version and roll it out and have then the option to go to patch back the copy version in case of trouble. We don't expect trouble, but you never know, and it would be less risky. That was the idea. And maybe also to mention, this is just Ruby 3.0. It is not yet enough for Jammy, but we talked about that in the copy open office hour. The next step should be much smoother and easier. So this work will continue, and we will then finally have the cloud controller that is ready for Jammy.
Right.
But this is the big step is 2.7 to 3.0, because there were tons of incompatible changes.
Sure. So I would have expected CI to already have bumped this. The update releases pipeline should have done this. We'll have to look at the old concourse, I think. But if you go to the update base releases group, the second group there. So these are all the base releases that are compiled into the compiled release ops file. But in here, there should be an update CAPI job. I don't see it. Yeah, there it is. There's update CAPI. This ran on the 8th, so 6 days ago. That consumed so the changes at least on develop. So now if we go back to the CF deployment pipeline, the question is, has it made it to release candidate? So if you click on the very far right-hand side, there's a release notes template job. If you just click on that and open up the generate release notes template and scroll down, we'll see all of the bumps that have made it. So it has not made it. CAPI 1.31, 131 is the last release that's there. So it's stuck being validated at the moment. So I think the biggest challenge is if you go back to the pipeline view, I wonder what's going on with BBR deploy, because that looks like it's in a bad way.
This is started
That is
6 days ago. Okay, Bosch.
See what it tried to do. Okay. So it failed on Cloud Controller, fine.
Oh, yeah.
But why is it not
It's
terminating?
No timeout? Will
Apparently not.
that Concourse task timeout or job timeout missing? But actually,
We don't have a, yeah, I mean, we don't have a job timeout because
Yeah.
I mean, that would just terminate Concourse, but it wouldn't
Yeah.
terminate the underlying Bosch task. But I don't know why the Bosch task isn't exiting at this point.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so it sounds like we need to manually unwedge this and rerun it.
Okay.
But yes, once we get that green and get fresh green, it looked like was the other one, then that change should arrive on release candidate. The question is, I see there are other changes in here. Do we need to cut a release before 1.132 lands on release candidate? Or is it okay for it all to be released together like this?
I think that's okay. Normally we don't have, let's say, interdependencies between, let's say, copy and CF Linux FS3, or that's
Right.
independent. And I would not expect. Normally we just consume what comes out of CF deployment. It's
okay.
just that we want to have a version with 1.3.2.
Right.
Ideally tested and released. That would make it.
Okay, so it sounds like we just need to get this unstuck and cut a release once it's green, which should be relatively straightforward. I'll just figure out why this is not happy. Yeah, very strange. I don't know why that would just stop like that.
Yeah, that's a bit odd. Bosch does not return.
Yeah, normally, yeah, we'll take a look.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay. So Ruby 3 is on the way. Anything else we need to discuss here?
I would just mention one thing regarding the GitHub teams for the working groups. There was a slight mistake in the naming. Eric just merged the PR to fix that. So in, I don't know, 3 to 4 hours, the correct names are there, but then the others are gone. If the automation works correctly with the yeah, this Peribolus is always a bit, you never know what comes out when it runs. And if you have used those names somewhere in Concourse, etc., that needs to be adapted or in branch protection rules. That's all. But since the spicy BR is knocking on the door, we wanted to get through this before more users are, use the wrong
I think we have not used the new names anywhere.
Okay, then it's no problem in this
on the old team, yeah. Okay.
No, I think the challenge for us is the desire to clean up the old teams, which is also coming next week, I believe.
I believe as well as like this, and it will be done the hard way. That means the idea will be discussed one more time. So if you want to raise a veto, just join the TOC meeting. Of course, we would.
No, I mean, I think it's fine. I think it's just that we're relying on the old team for a lot of access right now, because the list of private repositories that we need for the working group isn't up to date, and so we need to make sure that we get a PR in to fix that before the old team is removed.
So
Otherwise, we'll lose access to a few things that we kind of need, which would be great.
that yeah. I guess once this spicy PR is merged and well, it's cleaned up, then
Right.
we will have to look. We will get a lot of PRs also. And I checked Kapi, and there's so many. I mean, I don't think that anybody has an overview anymore who has access to what the repository. It's just to pick, but it's a normal thing that happens. It will.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll get there. Okay.
Yeah, just wanted to make you aware that
Okay,
there is
good.
trouble ahead potentially.
Potentially.
No, I appreciate
Notify us when it's done, and then we can adopt the new team names, and then everything is fine.
Yeah.
Good.
Cool.
So, anything else?
No, I don't think there's anything from my end. I mean, we definitely need to have more discussions about Bubble.
Yeah. Yes.
We can either do at the next meeting, or we can schedule something out of band for that. It's encouraging that you feel like you have the expertise to take on maintenance, which would be great.
No, I didn't say that. We have the expertise to use it.
Yes.
We have the expertise to use it, and it's working really nicely in our CF performance test environment, and likely also here for the new pipelines. But maintaining this.
Right. Yeah, that's a challenge.
I like the idea to have here a meeting, let's say also with Ruben, to talk a little bit about in which direction do we want to go. Is it Bubble? If so, then yeah, it needs a decision who maintains it, and if it's not Bubble, then we should not talk too much about the maintenance of Bubble, but more about the roadmap to this new tool, and then have a good split between the working groups.
Yeah, I can definitely provide more information about the challenges that there are with maintaining Bubble in its current state. And yeah, hopefully help everyone come to an informed decision as to what's the best path forward at this point.
Yep. So I can raise this question in the next TOC meeting, and then maybe we have a follow-up action to set up a meeting with Ruben, and then with Jochen before the vacation probably, or after, we will see. And then go on from there. Okay, regarding the release, Jochen, would you try to cut it tomorrow? Let's say assumption would be that this pipeline works through, or who would actually do that?
If we get the pipeline unstuck, of course we can try.
Yeah, and I'm happy to. I don't know. Let's see, 8:30. Yeah, it's a little late on a Friday. If you want to try and have me on the line while you're doing it, I mean, it's really not that complicated. So following the wiki instructions, I think should be fine.
Yeah, let's try it out, and if we have questions or stuck, then we can also ask offline via Slack, and then we cut the release on Monday. This is not
right.
The great thing. I just wouldn't wait too long, because it could be with the next release, and then we are a bit. I mean, also this is not a real problem, because of course we can patch down the Kapi version, but this is something we usually don't do. We try to do. Look forward to the
makes sense.
Version. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Then,
if there's nothing else, then
maybe for Dave, I don't know if you Jochen will be in vacation then for the next two meetings. I don't know.
Okay.
And, I mean, we can have this meeting anyway. I can host it or join and bring in at least what I know from SAP. It's a good idea, I would say, to talk regularly. So I would simply continue.
Yeah, I'm happy to touch base. It doesn't have to be a full hour meeting at that point. If there's not as much to talk about, that's fine. But I would hope that we're going to continue to make progress on moving pipelines over, getting those running on the working group concourse. So there'll definitely be updates. So yeah, I'm happy to keep, to still meet.
Okay, cool. Then let's do it like this.
Yeah, good. I will be back on August 25th. So no, I will be back a bit earlier, but August 25th is then the next meeting which I can attend. I'm also here next week. But the next 2 working group meetings I can't attend.
Not a problem. Enjoy your time away.
Yeah, certainly, yeah. Good. Yeah, if there's nothing else, okay, so we will try to cut a new deployment release tomorrow as far as we get. I will write down the meeting notes. Yeah. Then we're done for today. Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you.
And see you soon. Bye-bye.
See you.
Soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.